Welcome back to Tom's World Scale Model Series. In this episode, we embark on the construction phase of our Trumpeter KV-1 heavy tank. If you enjoy programming on scale modeling, then show your support by subscribing to this channel. Leave us a comment, like, dislike, or share the video with friends. Clicking the notification bell gives you alerts when we post new content. Or visit the channel Tom's World for a friendly visit for a complete list of all our videos. Our unboxing revealed a good quality and reasonably priced kit with nicely detailed, albeit somewhat flashy parts. In spite of a crewman depicted on the box top, there was no figure contained, although we did find clear parts and a length of copper braided wire for our towing cables. The box also contained both rubber band and Lincoln length tracks, although the former were a bit mangled and deformed. Still, it seemed we had everything we needed to bring this Russian colossus to life. So stick with us as we transform a box of plastic parts into a detailed scale model of the vehicle that struck terror in the hearts of its opponents. It's always exciting to start a new project, and to sweeten the deal, there's a couple of firsts on this one. We've never built a Trumpeter kit on the series, so I was looking forward to getting hands-on with the brand. And secondly, hard to believe that after all these years of building models, this is the first Russian military vehicle that I've ever built. I'm interested in World War II history, and Russia's contribution to the Allied victory is undeniable. And given how important armor was to the Red Army, I figured it was about time to build one of these brutish battle wagons. Step 1 calls for drilling a few holes. Some of the holes are for optional parts, so if you decide not to mount these, don't inadvertently drill holes you'll have to fill later. If we look closely, the instructions call for square holes. These aren't the easiest to make. I did make holes in the fenders, but I skipped the ones on the hull sides and front plates. I'll explain why a little bit later. Step 2 has us laminate sides onto the hull tub, and all the bump stops are separate pieces. Seems a bit over-engineered since most manufacturers cast the details directly on the tub sides. Our outer pieces are nicely detailed and of a good thickness, but right off the hop we get a look at the issue that'll haunt us throughout this project. And that's flash. It's everywhere, even on the knockout scars. On surfaces like this that must sit flat, these remnants aren't just eyesores, they can interfere with the fit. So it's important on this project to inspect your parts and be diligent with cleanup. This number 18 blade comes in handy for dealing with this kind of flash. No need to fill the depressions thankfully, but our surface has to be reasonably flat. After dressing the laminate, a dry fit reveals a good fit. We also get a sense at this point just how big this model is. The bump stops are all separate pieces. There's 12 in all, so it's a little bit of work to clean them up, but they do install easily. The construction on the model follows a pattern where we alternate between building one side up a little, then the other side a little, then back to the first side, and so on. Elastic bands, finger clamps, and these little bar clamps really came in handy on this build. So far, with careful cleanup, the part fit is very good. But we did encounter gaps on the front horizontal and vertical plates. The plates on most Sylvia tanks were often loose fitting, but there should be a weld bead on these ones, so we'll have to fill them. In this step, we also encounter the kit's tiniest parts, the dreaded tie-down eyes. My read of the instructions says all the eyes should be aligned, and I was careful to get everyone perfectly parallel to the hull sides. But don't waste your time aligning these. We see in this photo of a KV-1 engine deck that the tie-downs actually swivel. They're mounted with a single mounting bolt, as this hole suggests. Quite a few parts to attach in step 4 are swing arms, turret ring, towing lugs, and other sundries. And here are the parts cleaned up and ready for assembly. The rear intake parts fit together nicely, but we have a clear part to install which is overlapped by another piece, part A11. We can finish the light and mask it, or paint the parts separately, then complete the installation. I prefer painting parts separately prior to final construction, so I chose the latter method. There's also a slight gap on this rear shroud and we're tempted to fill it, but a quick look at the engine deck of a real KV-1 reveals Russian tank production plating standards. I'll leave this one gap alone as a homage to Soviet tank production quality control. Trumpeter keys the swing arms and their mounting holes with a solid hexagon pattern. The resulting joint is nice and strong, and it's near impossible to mount the swing arms incorrectly. Still, we have to pay attention to the direction of the swing arms. The KV-1 has trailing arms. That is, the swing arms point towards the rear of the vehicle. The swing arm pattern is symmetrical since the arms on the other side run in the same direction. It's interesting to note that on some vehicles that use torsion bar suspension, that being the Tiger and Panther, the swing arms are asymmetrical. That is, on one side the arms point to the rear and on the other they point forward. Another interesting feature of torsion bar suspended vehicles is that their wheels are misaligned. This overhead shot of our overturned KV-1 hull illustrates the layout. A straight edge reveals that the center line of each swing arm is slightly offset. This offset is needed to accommodate the torsion bars running beside each other. This illustration of a Panzer III suspension reveals the arrangement. More parts to attach on the other side of the hull in step 5, and we're also detailing the engine deck and glacis. Here the parts are ready for installation. We can pose our hatches open, and the kit comes with these little hinges. Since the kit doesn't have any interior details, I decided to button up the hatches. Step 1 called for a mounting hole to be made for part N8. I opted not to drill the mounting hole, so I shaved the little lip off of N8 and simply surface mounted it with thin model glue. At first it appears N8 is too short as it doesn't quite connect to the horn mounting bracket, but it's actually correct. As seen here on a real KV-1, this little pipe is actually a conduit or shield, and wires run from it to the horn and light. This conduit is centered between the horn and light on the vehicle in the picture, but on our model this conduit is offset. Not sure if this is an oversight on Trumpeter's part or whether the conduit position varied throughout the KV-1's production run. We could super detail this area with wires, but I'm going to build right out of the box. That way we can assess the kit on its own merits. The holes for the angle bracket that mounts on the nose are too big, so we'll have to do some filling here too. I also didn't make mounting holes for part D6, the ball mount lip. We simply remove the mounting pins off the lip and surface mount it with thin model cement. Surface mounting parts like this eliminates the need to fill if we inadvertently misalign or make our mounting holes too big. We're making good progress so far, but there's still lots to do. Well, time to tackle the parts which most tank mechanics and tank model builders dread, and that's the road wheels. When looking at the KV, it's easy to overlook just how many wheels it actually has. A total of 68 pieces make up the road wheels, drive and idler sprockets, and return rollers. The mating surfaces on the idler wheel halves are kinda wonky. If we look closely, we see that the inner hubs don't actually touch. Instead, the halves kind of float on these little spokes. The inner surfaces of the idlers needed a bit of sanding to get them to mate properly. I then glued the two halves together. As the glue dried, I slipped the idler wheel over its peg to ensure the halves were aligned. I'm not gluing the idler onto the peg, I'm just using the peg dry to align the idler halves as I press them together. And here's the finished idler wheel. The detail is nice. Step 7 has us build up the tracks. The rubber band tracks that came in the box were in rough shape, so we'll use the link and length ones. I did do a preliminary cleaning of the track parts, but we'll set them aside for now. I want to paint and weather the hull and running gear before installing the tracks, so we'll come back to them in episode 2. Step 8 has us install the port side wheels. I'm leaving them off for now so I can paint and weather them and the hull separately. The KV-1 has these odd brackets that extend in between the drive sprocket halves. These two parts have to be installed kind of at the same time. I'll leave them off for now to ease painting and weathering. We build up and attach the fenders next. The triangular brackets needed a little trimming here and there to get them to fit, and I did have to clamp the fenders to get them to mate tightly with the hull sides. The turret builds up with relatively few parts, about 20 in all. There was a tiny gap in one of the handles that we'll have to fill, but thankfully no gap on the other side. We're getting close to finishing, but a few more parts to install on the fenders. I'm leaving most of the parts loose to ease painting and weathering. I didn't drill mounting holes for these towing cable clamps. The mounting lips on the clamps were removed and the clamps were surface glued onto the hull with thin cement. I followed the same installation process on the front ball mount. Short lengths of copper braided cable and styrene stems and end loops make up our tow cables. The end stems are solid, and I felt that using a butt joint would be too fragile, so I drilled a hole in the stems. Then the ends of the copper wire were carved down a little bit. This creates a taper on the end. We can then slip a bit of the end of the copper wire into the hole and seal the joint by flooding it with thin CA. With our fenders attached, the hull is really taking shape. The swing arm detail looks great. And she looks even better with the turret mounted. I'll install the machine guns in their ball mounts right before painting, since the guns are very delicate and fragile. Otherwise, with our major sub-assemblies complete and the remainder of our parts cleaned up, we're ready to advance to the next stage of the project. And that'll do it for this part 1 of our Trumpeter KV-1 build. Make sure to join us for part 2 where we paint and weather our Russian Colossus. If you enjoyed the video, why not support the channel by subscribing or by clicking the like button. Feel free to leave us a comment or visit the channel Tom's World for a neighborly visit and for more entertaining and informative videos. Until next time, comrades, do sbadania, dobry večer, stay well and all the best.